ahead of the publication of a brand new book detailing the 2020 election and the waning days of the former guy's presidency. Another story has been released, which reportedly left Trump's own chief of staff at the time, John Kelly, quote, stunned. After obtaining a copy of Michael Bender's new book, Frankly, We Did Win This Election, The Guardian is reporting that during a trip to Europe to mark the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I, Trump told Kelly this, quote, well, Hitler did a lot of good things. The remark was reportedly made during an apparent history lesson from Kelly to Trump, in which he, quote, reminded the president which countries were on which side during the conflict. According to Bender's sources, Kelly pushed back despite Trump's insistence on Germany's economic recovery under Hitler during the 30s, with Kelly replying that even if his claim were true, quote, you cannot ever say anything supportive of Adolf Hitler, end quote. In a statement, Trump's spokesperson said this is totally false. President Trump never said this. It is made up fake news, probably by a general who was incompetent and was fired. Trump himself also denied the conversation to Michael Bender. According to the book, General Kelly has not yet responded to requests for comment. Joining our conversation, Paul Rieckhoff, founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, president of Righteous Media, and the host of the Independent Americans podcast. Tim and Eugene are still with us. Paul Rieckhoff, there's so much reporting. I'm not going to read all of it now because we don't have the time, but The Atlantic reported things with sort of the same kinds of undertones. There's been reporting, and Trump has talked about the Germans publicly before. What do you make of these revelations in Michael Bender's new book and the disparaging comments about General Kelly in knocking them down?
Well, it's not a glitch. It's not a slip up. It's a feature. It's a part of a consistent and ongoing strategy to push certain types of messages. And those messages right now are continuing to fuel domestic insurgency and extremism all across America, even if somebody in the spokesperson's office tries to walk it back. If you're a member of QAnon, if you're a member of the Oath Keepers, if you're another extremist group operating and organizing in America, this is another signal that you have the support of the former president of the United States, who is continuing to be at war in public with a variety of senior and current and former senior military officials, whether it's General Kelly or it's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. We continue to be at war with ourselves. And these are signals to so many extremist groups that continue to operate and activate almost every day. Over the weekend, while everyone was celebrating July 4th, 11 heavily armed men were arrested in a standoff in Massachusetts. A Democratic elected official had her office shot at. Oath Keepers were arrested today by the FBI. So 6 months later, there are still people at large who participated in the terrorist attack on the Capitol on January 6th. So the stakes are very high. And these messages continue to fuel and empower these people. It's a green light. Almost every news cycle has a new one that continues to fuel this very dangerous national security threat.
Well, and it's a green light to the kinds of rhetoric about Hitler that just hasn't been part of public discourse. It's so heinous. And you've got people like Marjorie Taylor Greene likening President Biden's promise to go door to door, offering people vaccines to medical brown shirts. I mean, it has been sort of not ushered back in because it wasn't here, but it has been ushered into the public square in a way that is reprehensible. And I wonder if you can just speak more about that being part of the discourse and the impact that has on people attracted to extremism.
It's consistent, and it may be a fringe part of the Republican Party, but it's the same group of leaders who are very public, who are in elected positions of power, that continue to repeat the same kind of messages. Now, even if you gave them the benefit of the doubt and said these are sloppy slip-ups or they're ignorant, the margin of error here is zero. In American politics, there used to be no room for talking positively about Hitler. But this is a new normal where elements of the Republican Party continue to echo these messages and compound these messages and empower the most extreme, dangerous domestic groups in this country. This is more than just political slippage. This is more than just sloppy talk. This is empowering domestic terrorism. And that is something that our enemies continue to celebrate. Putin, Kim Jong-un, ISIS. They love seeing this kind of stuff where it looks like America is at war with itself.
You know, Tim Miller, John Kelly is in this story, too. And General Kelly, whatever people think of his service to Donald Trump, is a celebrated general of the post-9/11 era. And he worked for a president who he had to plead with to not praise Hitler. I mean, I don't know where to begin, but why hasn't someone like John Kelly spoken out about the ex-president's march toward autocracies and the party that's still following him?
You know how to tickle my things to get my goat, Nicole, because as soon as I heard this story, I was like, Trump is heinous, stipulated. We know that. Where is John Kelly? Like, where has John Kelly been? I appreciate and am grateful for his service to the country. The sacrifice that his family made is just unimaginable. But at the same time, you have a responsibility, and you were in the room. He had a responsibility to be on the record before the election that ended up being a little bit too close for comfort. He had a responsibility to be on the record between the election and the January 6th and the transfer of power on January 20th. And he was nowhere. And now you're talking to Michael Bender, great reporter. I'm sure it's going to be a great book for a book that comes out, 9 months too late, frankly. It's just really frustrating that there weren't more people like John Kelly speaking out at a time when it was urgent. And, when you hear this kind of talk, just adding on one other thing about Paul, obviously I don't want to create any sort of equivalence to the idea that a president could say something like this is just mind-boggling. But there is an increasing amount of anti-Semitic talk on the fringes all over our politics right now. Yeah. And having a president echo that, is a problem. And it's extremely important that not just John Kelly, but that other folks, on the left and the right, when they see, this kind of talk, are speaking out against it and calling it out. We just went through a wave of violence against Jews in New York and elsewhere. And so, this is, has real life consequences. It's not just, loose talk when it's coming from the president or elsewhere.
Yeah, Paul, that we'd even put it in the category of loose talk. This was an American president talking about the good things that Hitler did. In Europe, where, it's the ignorance and the sort of affection for heinousness that both smack you on the side of the head. But I want to come back, Paul, to you with John Kelly. What good could John Kelly do for General Milley or for the larger fight against extremism inside the military by speaking out against authoritarianism, neo-Nazism, all these impulses that are now flourishing?
He can step up. He can answer the call to service. He can step up again on behalf of his country, and he's sacrificed unimaginably with the loss of his son, and he's had a tremendous service record over his time in uniform. But this is more important than all that combined in many ways. Like, this is an existential threat. It's the number one national security threat, and Trump's calling him a liar. Trump's questioning his integrity. He's besmirching his record. He's got his minions coming after him. So it's not just General Milley. There are plenty of folks who've worn the uniform who said, I couldn't speak out when I was in uniform. I couldn't speak out when I was inside. Well, they're not inside anymore. General Milley's got restrictions. General Austin, Secretary Austin's got restrictions. They're going to bite their tongue. But General Kelly needs to come out full bore with everything he's got and try to organize others who can counter the narrative that Trump had somehow captured the military or had, this free reign over the Pentagon and that people did what he said. It wasn't Trump's military. It was America's military. And nobody can say that more powerfully than someone like Kelly, who was standing right next to him during all those meetings.
And Eugene, this idea that people like General Mattis, people like H.R. McMaster, Dina Powell, John Kelly didn't want to speak out before the election. I think that's wrong. I think that was a waste. But that is in the rearview mirror. We're now dealing as a country with extremism in our military, in our law enforcement, in our Congress. What good do you think that group could do by speaking out?
Well, just shame on all of them. Shame on General Kelly for not speaking out. And yes, before the election. Shame on General Mattis for not speaking out on the record. Shame on Rex Tillerson, not in the military, but was Secretary of State, was quoted as referring to the president as a bleeping moron. Why wasn't he on the record telling America what he knew about Donald Trump and what he knew about being in the room with Donald Trump and how unwise it was to give this man the responsibility that had been entrusted to him, and how unthinkable it was that he could be reelected. Where were they all? I don't get it. I don't understand. But I have to hold them responsible and hold them accountable for their silence, which is, at this point, unpatriotic. It is absolutely unpatriotic to maintain that silence. And if they think it is the right thing to do for their country, they need to think again. It's wrong.
Powerful words from Eugene Robinson, Paul Rykoff, and Tim Miller. Thank you all so much for spending some time with us today. When we come back, what Democrats can pull from Eric Adams' playbook after his narrow victory in the New York City mayoral primary. That story's next.